So this is the beginning of the intro movie for Jak 3, and in the intro movie, obviously, it's important to establish the setting, the wasteland. It's important to establish the characters, and also important to bring everyone who hasn't played Jak 1 and Jak 2 up to speed with the story. So as we're seeing the ship rocket across the wasteland here, when I was animating this, there were actually no trees, no cactuses, no big rocks for my reference. So when they put them in the game, I was relieved when my ship wasn't actually passing through any of it. Now this guy Viger, he's one of the new characters. He's the main villain of the piece. And what's interesting about Viger is we're always trying to refine the work that we do, and we did his facial animation system slightly differently than we've done in the past, and it actually worked out very well so that all the new characters in this game use the new facial animation system. So let's see, we got our favorite feathered friend Pecker coming in here, the half-monkey, half-bird character, and dropping in right behind him a second later is Daxter, who's always trying to upstage him. One of the things we tried to play up in this game that we had a lot of fun with in Jak 2 is the rivalry between Pecker and Daxter, you know, the two cute animal mascots, and so we really sort of pushed that in this game. We got Ashlyn Shashing with her sexy walk right up there, and you're about to see something that looks very simple, Ashlyn putting something into Jak's hand and sliding her fingers off, but in fact doing moves like that, passing things back and forth between characters, takes a while. That little thing there took me a couple of hours. Now, as the ship flies away and leaves a big dust cloud in its wake and dissipates to reveal Daxter and Pecker, one of the interesting things is the effects animation, such as spire and smoke and dust, is all done later by our effects animators. What we do is we simply place a little node in the scene to say, here, put a dust cloud here, or put a flaming ball of fire here, and they all take care of that much later on. So we don't actually get to see it until it's in the game. And here they are all walking into the desert.
This scene is a really good example of just the collaborative process at Naughty Dog. So many people had their pieces in the puzzle to make this whole scene come together. Jason Martinson was the animator. Also, Mike Fadalun did a lot of the special effects animation, which you're going to see in a few seconds. In addition to that, of course, we had Troy Adam doing all kinds of, as you can see, all the special effects with the particles in the background, sort of adding life to the whole battle that's going on. What we wanted to do when we started the story idea for Jak 3 was we wanted to really kind of show the players that played Jak 2 that the world's going to really change. And so right off the bat we said, well, you know, that palace is just going to have to come down because we want to basically show that Haven City is forever altered in this war. And again, this is showing sort of the cross-section of how these scenes were put together. This scene took forever. We really shot a lot of our special effects load early on this one. As you can see, the entire palace comes down in one big giant piece, and that animation took forever. Again, a number of people working on this to make all the pieces come together, and then the magic of the music and sound effects on top of it to sell it.
This is one of the first scenes I animated. It's your introduction to the Wastelanders, the King Damus and Cleaver. Little known fact, if you get the secret orbs, you can turn off Cleaver's cloth, and you get to see his hairy legs and his skid marks.
I smell a storm coming.
You sure that's a storm you smell, Damus?
All right, so it's our first time back after the intro movie, and we get to see Jak and Daxter nice and safe. We also see there's been a wardrobe change, and Jak's gotten a haircut, so hopefully his little hand gesture gets to draw attention to that. When I first started working on this, the stage was not really done at all. They were, in the process of working on that. I did know there were steps, and I knew there were pools of water. So, two things I thought of were bringing Damus down the steps and get them closer together, and also get Daxter to wring out his tail so I can get just a secondary action in the scene. I also didn't really know what was going on with Damus. Is he good? Is he bad? Should we be worried about him? I knew that Dan, our writer, probably knew exactly where he was going, but I knew that I didn't, and also the viewer didn't. So we got to, kind of leave a little mystery for Damus. and he talks pretty tough. So I know that after this scene, I didn't quite know if I liked him or not. But then I also get to have Daxter act cute.
What happens
So
to the ones that don't crawl?
maybe that balances out the scene with all the tough talk.
I was afraid of that.
This is a scene showing the battle arena for the first time. The Wastelanders, as you know, are basically, they live out in this desert, the Wasteland cities, named Spargus, and it's out in the middle of this giant desert. And these guys are pretty tough hombres, and they use this arena kind of as a proving ground for themselves to see who the strongest are. And so the survival of the fittest idea is basically what their whole creed is. Basically, Jack and Daxter show up at this place not having any idea what they're going to do, and all of a sudden they realize they're going to be tested in fighting. So once again, they have to prove themselves if they're going to even stay in Spargus, and prove themselves to be Wastelanders. The arena illustrates sort of the contrast between Haven City and the Wasteland, where out here, basically Jack and Daxter are in significantly more peril. They're fighting for their lives and fighting to prove that they're worthy to stay in Spargus, the Wasteland City itself. Again, really what this is also is for the player is that it's the beginning of a series of adventures and challenges, both training them and also easing them into the game.
Hi, this scene was a lot of fun.
That's right.
Any scene that has Daxter and Pecker going at it like this is a lot of fun to animate. They're both really fun characters to do. What's interesting is this scene didn't have the gun in it originally. It just had Damus yelling at Jack, but it was decided that he needed to get the gun somewhere in this scene, so we had to squeeze it in there somewhere, and so the toss ensued.
You mean you have to fight against actual people?
Daxter grabs his face at this point, and that was an incredible pain to do, so I hope you all appreciate that.
Alright, that's it. I want to be on his shoulder.
This is the scene where Damus realizes that Jack is a little bit more than he seems. Speaking of which, one thing about this scene is that everybody who animated scenes in the arena ended up having to reposition everything because about halfway into production, they ended up rotating the arena by 90 degrees. It doesn't happen too often, but when it does, it's a lot of fun.
And that could be useful.
Now, what's interesting about this scene is we have a lot of scenes in this game where the characters are basically doing a lot of explaining and a lot of sort of expository dialogue. So the trick in the scenes like this is rather than just cutting back and forth to a lot of talking heads, is to try to keep the camera dynamic with interesting angles on the scenes so you all don't get bored and button out of the cutscenes. Because, you know, we don't like it when you button out of the cutscenes. Once again, Daxter gets burned. Animating Daxter is very fun. Animating the little flaps on his hat is not quite as much fun. This scene is the introduction to the Precursor Monk scene. She was a really challenging character to animate because, unlike all the other characters in our game, she's very subtle in her motions for the most part, especially with her voice. She's actually voiced by Tara Strong, who does a lot of work for cartoons and video games. Did a really nice job with her.
Thanks for the tip.
One of the interesting things about this scene is that I animated it well before the final version of Jack for Jak 3 was designed. So I was actually using the old Jak model, the model from Jak 2. And when we changed the character design, we actually changed some of his proportions a little bit. So I ended up having to come back to this scene later and reanimate Jack's chest and some of Daxter's positions on his body armor because everything had shifted around slightly. I know it doesn't sound like much, but little things like that add up to a lot. Now coming up here is a little homage I did to one of my favorite actors. I'll leave it up to you to guess who it is. And now, time for a mini-game.
This scene is one of the first times you actually see sort of something alluding to something bigger happening, where this dark satellite is here, and Seam is talking about how it's communicating with something even bigger. Again, we're just trying to foreshadow where this is heading, the story. One of the things that's interesting about creating these animations is, you write these lines, and then an actor will take them and bring them to life at one level and in the recording studio, and we go in and we direct the actors, and it's a lot of fun because the words just kind of spring to life. And then an animator gets a hold of it, and it's just amazing because they really breathe life into the character, and suddenly everything just all comes together, and it just becomes a living, breathing thing. It's quite an exciting thing to watch, really, from the beginning of script and text all the way to the end, when you see these characters actually feel like they're your friends, and you start to really know them, and they seem to feel like they really have energy and life behind the eyes. And then when you add sound and music, suddenly the whole scene becomes much greater than the sum of the parts. It's amazing.
Well, if it isn't the newbies.
All right, so this was my first scene. I got to use Cleaver, and we have a bunch of new characters in this game, and as the games have progressed, the characters get new controls and little animation controls for us to use. And at this point, they were getting really easy and it gave us a lot more power. So Cleaver had all these extra controls, so I got to have fun with him. His facial and mustache, and he's even got a little jiggle on his belly. But here's another character we don't really know much about, if we should trust. The Wastelanders seem to be kind of shady, so I had to kind of try to play him that way. And since he also references putting Daxter on a barbecue and having him for a snack, I knew that was not a friendly thing to do. But yeah, he's a fun character.
One thing I can do, it's race.
This scene ran into a slight problem that we have a lot, where there's important information going on that the player must learn about, and there's other humorous antics going on in the background, and we have to balance the sound out, which sometimes can be disappointing to the animator, but it needs to be done for the gameplay. This was a fun scene to do. I got to abuse Daxter, fling him around. I love doing that. And here he comes again. On his way back, he'll be hammering away at the lizard, trying to get out of its mouth. And Baruch Baruch, some mumbo jumbo, which means spit out little orange lightning.
This scene was great. I really enjoyed working on this scene, and it got a chance to finish up the mission that I just thought was so cool, where you're chasing around the dinosaurs. And Errol, this is the first glimpse you get of Errol, Cybro Errol, reconstructed Errol, and I just thought his character was so cool that I had a good time animating him. The one thing I remember about the scene is I had to turn it around in, I think, about 3 or 4 days, because we had to get it done for E3. So I'm pretty pleased with the way it turned out, all things given, time restrictions and all.
Paranoid, buddy boy. Come on, Bigfoot, let's get back. This desert gives me the creeps.
So this is about the funniest scene I got to work on. It was a lot of fun just with Dax and Pecker jabbing back and forth and try to get as much personality and comedy into it. The little rivalry has been going on since Jak 2, so this was just another chance to kind of keep it going and have fun. With all the serious scenes I got to work on, this was nice to have just a little lighter moment. And then with an off-screen gesture that really gets Pecker going. And then we get to go into a little of the softer side again with Damus and his furthering relationship with Jak. So this was just an overall fun scene to do. And we go on to the next scene.
This scene is leading Jack out into sort of an adventure to go catch some lizards. One of the things that's really interesting about cinematics in video games is really they have to do triple duty. We have, obviously, first and foremost, we want to entertain. We want people to be excited by what they're watching, and it should be funny if we can help ourselves. But also, we want to move the plot forward, so it has to have some reasonably expository stuff telling the player how this the story is moving and the arc is moving. But third and foremost, and obviously probably the most important, is we want to tell the player what to do. So basically, in a very short amount of time, we're trying to do quite a bit of stuff to make the scenes actually work as we write them and as we record them and of course animate them, trying to emphasize important pieces. So this is an example of him being sent out, and it goes through a whole sequence, and this is where Deimos for the first time is really kind of reacting to Jack as a father in the sense. He's almost like trying to take him under his wing. There are some strong paternal instincts going on here, and it's very new to Jack, something he hasn't felt before. So.
This scene wasn't originally supposed to be in the game, but focus testers actually, when they first went into this room, were not clear as to where they were supposed to go, so we added this little camera move showing you where you're supposed to go.
This scene takes place once you get to the top of the temple. Jack and Daxter are talking about how they're going to get across and get to where the precursor monks have already been. What's probably most interesting about the scene from a behind-the-scenes standpoint is that the camera, the way we do the camera here, is just one camera that moves by single frame to insinuate the cut that you would see in a movie. But what made it a little more difficult was that I had to have a separate camera for the ground shots and a separate camera that was actually fixed to the glider that they're going to get into in a second, and that just added a little bit more to the difficulty of the scene.
So this is another scene that was animated by Greg Griffith. This is after you've gone through the volcano and gotten to this deep part of it and discovered this monk that's been mummified by the Dark Eco. Again, sort of just kind of reiterating the idea that Dark Eco is so dangerous and that Jack is playing with fire when he's been exposed to it, and so is Daxter. The animations, like these animations again, require so many different pieces being put together. The models that are being built, the high-res models, the sets, everything that has to go into this process of creating these 6 seconds a day that we do. Actually, it's just an incredible number of people that work behind the scenes to make this happen. And that background you can see there, of course, was built as part of the volcano. And some of the sets are even more high-res than that. They're actually not even level sets. They're actually really detailed high-res sets. This is Daxter continuing to refer to his beloved missing pants that he lost since Jack and Daxter, the first adventure. A recurring joke we've had for a long time. And hopefully we'll pay that off in the end. Just to give you an idea of the process, this scene is about 30 seconds long, which took an animator about a week to complete, a week of a lot of long hours. They try to do about 6 seconds a day. When the scene is actually written and then recorded, and we try to cut this using a sound tool to cut down the sound file as tight as possible, we kind of consider the editing process in the front as important as in the back. Again, it's almost like writing, where you think you've cut the scene as tight as you possibly can, then you come back a couple minutes later and it's still not tight enough.
Isn't it time for you ankle biter?
This scene right here was a lot of fun to do. It just gave me a chance to use Jack and Daxter together and have them be kind of like a buddy-buddy type thing where Daxter's actually picking on Jack. So you get to see how, good friends they really are.
This is another arena scene that I did that has Pecker and Daxter going at it again. A lot of fun. I really enjoyed all the scenes with Pecker. What's interesting about Pecker here is that in some of the scenes, even though you can't see his feet, he's really just floating in midair. I had to sort of slide him around to stage the camera the way I wanted. So hopefully that's invisible to you guys, but it was something that had to be done. That's it.
This is a cool scene right here. This is actually my first time animating a female in the game, and up until then I've been animating mostly guys, and so it was really tough to try and nail her down. And you know, she's really sassy. She has a lot of attitude, so I just try to put as much of that in there as possible. But she also has like a really soft side, so I try to show that as well. And for this scene, it was a really, I guess, a tender, touching moment of some sort. So I try to, you know, play the balance very lightly between being aggressive and being very subtle. So I think it came out pretty good. So the Marauders have come over the hill, and I'm thinking 70s car chase movies all the way.
Okay, so yeah, I got a little bit of grief over that little bend into the Hellcat so she can get Jack's hoverboard out. But the way I figured it, if she had to get something out of the Hellcat, she'd have to bend over to get it. There's nothing implied. There was a lot of touching, it seems, back and forth between them. She keeps grabbing his shoulder or his hand. That kind of stuff is looks real nice, but really hard to do. So this scene probably took a little bit more time than it should have, but I thought it kind of pays off with getting to see a little softness. So we've just entered the intro to the Mind Boss fight, and this scene was was the longest scene I had worked on at the time. I think I clocked in close to a little over a minute, and it was really cool to get to work with a scene that had more exposition, where they get to find out more about the story. It's the first time we've seen Viger since the intro, and even though we kind of get the idea that he's not a good guy in the intro movie, we get to hear a little bit more about just his evil plans, so I got to have more fun with his character. And I think we got really good reading from the actor, so that made this scene a lot more fun to animate. One of the hard parts to set up for the staging was this giant room has a pedestal that Jack is on and he's trapped on, and then there's a big giant space in between him and Viger. So staging the camera from back and forth, if you ever needed to see both people in the same shot, there was really a real long distance in between. So I had to do what I could to trick the camera, or also just use really long lenses. So you kind of get to use certain film effects or film techniques to try to compress space. And here's Daxter going off on his little fantasy of being surrounded by women, which does not go well with Viger. I know we tried to use this joke a couple times about him getting his name wrong, so I thought that was kind of fun to work with. I think it happens again later on in the game. And here we go.
This scene was a lot of fun. This is where Jack and Daxter finally get back to the Hip Hog, the Naughty Otzel, as it was in the end of the second game. Daxter is a little miffed that his bar has been taken over as headquarters by Torn. Just fun because they make a reference to the fact that they use the sign outside as target practice, and that gets played up in another scene, and the thing actually gets destroyed.
That guy always was.
This is also where you get the
quiet.
first hint
We
that
bigger
Viger is
pirates.
probably behind
Sent me on a
what's been
suicide
going on
attack
with
into the port, and we got cut off.
various
Now we can't get
doings in the game.
HQ.
And
Our forces are divided.
at this point,
and metalhead fronts are squeezing
Torn
from
is
both sides.
talking about how they're going to be attacked by the blast bots.
Uh-oh.
The blast bot pops up here as a hologram, which was a little bit of work to do. It was really adds a lot to the scene, I thought, but it was a little bit extra work.
This scene was a doozy. Just before I was able to finish the scene, I just had to do some final tweaks on Daxter's eyes. I was told that they had to cut a couple FMAs and somehow splice Errol into the middle of the scene that I'd finished, which completely changes the mood of everything, and it made no sense at first, but so I was able to rearrange some things. Some stuff had to be cut out. Dialogue had to be completely flipped and everything, so it was a big mess. But I finally got it to work. An interesting note is all the holograms here, all the facial animation had to be done with 3 bones. We weren't able to use morph targets and use this hologram effect, so that was quite a challenge to get some nice voice reads and emotion on these things with 3 joints. This Daxter line was a blast to animate, and I decided to hold this last face here for impact.
In a barrel.
There's a really funny story behind this scene, but I really don't have time to tell it.
This was one of my favorite scenes to animate. I got to do character interaction with Daxter and Tess. Certain body parts pressing up against one another, some hugging, and playful animation. And of course, it has chicks with guns, which everybody likes. She gets to lug around this monster gun, which is scaled down about 70% of the size it really is in the game for Jack. Otherwise, it was absurdly huge, which is only funny when Daxter holds it.
It's a hobby.
And here's their shocked response to her skills. And some more flirting between the 2 lovebirds.
Okay, on this scene, I tried to do a little different entrance. I was getting tired of Jack and Dax walking in with Dax on his shoulder, same time, every scene. So I thought it'd be fun if Dax just kind of came flying in and grabbed Tess. Now it was kind of fun to see her kind of go off and about her little fantasy world, and Dax is playing along with it. Hopefully I got to get the sense of get Jack's annoyance with the whole situation. But this is where we get into the meat of the scene, and they get to go on their gun course.
So this scene was actually a lot of fun to animate, especially with all these dynamic camera moves and the Naughty Otzel blowing up. And hopefully the humor of the Naughty Otzel statue blowing up distracts you from the fact that there's no reference to the Dark Eco that you just rescued.
I animated this scene just before our focus test deadline. The whole thing was animated in one day. It was a really long, grueling day for me. And I realized that I'd forgot to add Daxter, and I hadn't even started him yet. So I just put him in at the end, poked his head out.
This is the first scene I did in the game. I think Torn is actually one of the hardest characters to animate. The way he comes across is very cool, calm, and collected, and but occasionally he'll let out a little aggression or some anger of some sort. And I think those are one of the more exciting times with him. But it's cool to play that balance between cool and rage.
This is a very unique cutscene. We have a new technology that me and programmer Amir came up with. We spent time figuring out a way to constrain the camera to an in-game car that's set on a path by Amir, and it drives through the desert on the set coordinates. And I animated the whole scene with these two characters just sitting in a car, sitting still, talking to each other, just talking heads, basically. And I didn't know how it was going to work out. We didn't even know if it was going to work until we finally got it all into the game, and it turned out quite successful. It's really a cool scene. You get to see the background flying by. And it was used also in one of the other scenes after the fact, and probably will be used much more in the future.
I'll tell you when the action's coming.
We may have a way to reach freedom.
This scene right here was really fun because it was my first time to get to use Jinx, and this is the first time, his first speaking role in the game, so it gave me a chance to really kind of think about what I was going to do with him. So he sounded a little bit like a gangster, so I tried to add that into it a little bit and trying to make him seem kind of really slimy and a greasy type of character. So it was a lot of fun, and I got a chance to do some more gags with Daxter and in the cigar and things like that. So that was a lot of fun as well.
This scene takes place after you've defended the Freedom League headquarters from an attack of robots. One of the most amazing illusions that actually happens here in this process of animating is that these voices of all these actors are often recorded in entirely different places and in entirely different times. I mean, Max Casella, the voice of Dax, is recorded in New York. And a lot of these other characters, whether it be Susan Eisenberg, who's the voice of Ashlyn, or Phil Lamar, who is the voice of Viger here, they're done sometimes weeks apart, maybe days apart, but entirely different rooms, never together. And then we cut the whole thing together and cut it as tight as we can, and it gives the illusion of actually actors reacting and talking to each other. Usually. And in fact, in this scene, we have kind of a moment where the scene was spliced incorrectly, and also Ashlyn had a line that was supposed to be recorded here that was missing. And as you can tell here coming up, that the transition's a little rough. So Viger's very angry at them for basically rallying around Jack and defending Jack for the first time, and he's basically giving them a pox on their whole family, and he walks off. And this scene right here, right there, the transition doesn't quite work because Ashlyn was supposed to be saying something else, and the line wasn't there. But that's the parallel of it all. But generally speaking, most of the time when you actually cut these things, it all feels like it's all happening right in front of you in real time, which is kind of the beauty and the magic of it all. So here's Pecker talking. He's voiced by Chris Cox. Pecker is a really, really cool character. People really love that. And the character, and Chris Cox just really added this incredible side to him. He's sort of the manic Hispanic, as we say.
This scene really is a great demonstration of Jack's inner struggle. Who am I kidding?
This is the first time that we actually get to see Cyber Arrow. He's alluded to a lot in the game, and this is the first time you see his full body. He's the most detailed character we have in this game. He's 20,000 polygons, which I've heard is 10 times more polygons than a full screen of a PS1 game. All the animators are really drooling over getting to animate this guy, so I was really fortunate to be able to work on him during his big I'm gonna kill the world scene. The voice actor went really over the top with this scene, and so I was able to just push all of his action as far as I could. I did all the animation before they added the voice effect on him, and that really punched it up even more. And after all the exaggerated motions I did, the one thing that left the biggest impression is boink, this little finger thing right there.
This is sort of the culmination of Seam's character arc. She begins to realize at this point that Jack is the savior of the planet, and begins to open up a little bit to him, and in this case gives him a very, very important artifact. We were hoping to actually have this scene originally, believe it or not, have Seam as a death scene. So if you can actually listen to this animation or listen to the recording, you can hear that her voice is very different, because some of the takes were originally directed as her dying in the rubble. So she's kind of this whisper, almost death. As you can see, Daxter is really funny. He's like my secret weapon. There's an old adage in Hollywood that if you have a boring scene, have somebody run in with a gun. Well, in my case, it's Daxter. I always have him run in. He's perfect. He's my secret weapon.
This is a really cool scene. This is the Precursor Torres. It gave me a chance to really do some quick, snappy animation with Daxter, have a little fun with him and that sort of thing. And Jack is just kind of ignoring him and not paying attention to him. And of course, Daxter wants the attention. So I like the scene a lot. It's really cool.
Who knows what Arrow will try to
This scene was a lot of fun to work on. This
gotta take him out.
probably is the only scene in the entire Jak and Daxter trilogy that has Daxter actually arguing to go on the mission rather than arguing against it, so it was a lot of fun to try to kind of do that role reversal, and anytime Daxter goes on one of his long rants, it's a lot of fun. Originally I had listened to the sound file for this one. I had a lot of plans for different poses and different things that he could do, and then when I got into the scene I noticed that he had about a 4-inch wide ledge to stand on without stepping on the actual hollow viewer they have there, so I had to try to get the things I wanted to get done without having him roam too far. So, but all in all, this was probably one of my favorite scenes to work on. I actually put myself a little bit behind schedule putting the extra time to this one, but it was a lot of fun. This was also the only scene I did with Ashlyn, who was a nice break from the other men.
This is one of the toughest scenes I probably had to do. It just had a lot of elements to do with it. And in this scene right here, Jack meets up with Pecker in the palace ruins here, and he gets surrounded by the Neo satellites. And it was kind of tough because of a lot of different elements that went into it, especially Jack is supposed to be scared, but since he is the hero of the game, he really can't show that he's afraid. And also, coming up here, you see where Damus busts through the door, and there's a lot of effects with the door coming down and the satellites getting blown up and that sort of thing. And just to put that all together and have it mesh well was a very tough thing to do. But I'm pretty happy with this scene.
Let's finish this.
Okay, so when we first get our scenes and we listen to the audio, we get to sit down and look at what we're going to do for the whole scene. This scene presented a challenge in that there was a lot of stuff going on with not a lot of stuff going on. There was, we find out about the father relationship. Damus, slowly dies away, and then Viger shows up, and so what I tried to do, mainly setting up this scene, was just try to figure out the position that they're getting to have this heart-to-heart. I was also kind of constrained by Damus being trapped under a truck, so I couldn't really do a lot of stuff with the cameras. But once I set up the pose, I just really went around and tried to play with all the camera angles to try to get the most emotional response I could, because just the scene is so heavy. That flashback there was actual animation from the kid from Jak 2. And now Viger coming up, he's always really a lot of fun to work with. The readings we get from Phil, who's also the voice of Sig, amazingly enough, are just always great. So, again, we have, them conversing back and forth with just an amount of space in between them. I couldn't really have a lot of action, so I just really had to work with the emotional content back and forth, and just try to play off of that. Okay, so Viger's about to take off, and this posed a challenge for me as well, because Jak's just kind of having to ignore the fact that his dad just died and that he just found that out, and it was kind of hard to bring the emotion back down to get us back into the game and get us on to the next level.
The beginning of this scene is an example of what happens when an animator gets a crazy idea in his head, like, let's have all the lights turn on slowly and gradually. It's actually not quite as simple as you might think. It took a couple of programmers and a little bit of time to get it all working, but I think it looks cool. Yeah, this scene, when Dan Arey, our creative director, first told me that the precursors are going to be a bunch of Otzels like Daxter, I said, ooh, you gotta let me animate the scene where they're revealed. Little did I know that the scene was going to be nearly 4 minutes long, and that I'd have to do it in about 5.5 weeks. But hey, that's all right. These things happen. It's a very interesting, very complicated scene. There's a lot of characters. There's a lot of stuff going on. Here's a return of our precursor entity from the end of Jak 2, for those of you who actually managed to finish Jak 2. Congratulations. We've also got Viger in this scene. Viger, for me, I think, was one of the most fun characters to animate, not only because Phil Lamar, who also does the voice of Sig, did such a great job voicing him, but he's just got such an expressive face. So after he gets transformed and he's looking up and he's looking all smug about being imbued with precursor stuff, he has that wonderfully smug look on his face. Now, of course, at this point, this is where the illusion starts to fall apart. Jak and Daxter have had just about enough of being told what to do after 3 games worth of being errand boys for the precursors, and so we have a nice little off-screen crotch grab from Daxter. Been waiting 3 games to do that. And now the moment you've been waiting 3 games for, the big precursor reveal. This is something that I talked about a lot with Dan, and we thought about many different ways that we could do this, and we figured it would just be best if we saw them from behind and they didn't quite realize what was going on, and then boing, and just a long, long take of everybody just sort of staring at each other and sizing each other up. These 3 precursor Otzels don't actually have names. They're referred to as Otzel Leader, who's the guy with the staff, Otzel Surfer, who's kind of the hey dude fellow, and then, of course, Otzel Dummy, who's the guy with the helmet over his eyes and who and the big buck teeth. Which is not to say that people with buck teeth are necessarily dumb, but these are just the way these things pan out sometimes. This part was a lot of fun to animate, everybody's little reaction takes to what the precursors really are. And frankly, I'd kind of like to be in the living rooms or parents' basements of America watching when a lot of people who've played the series before see the precursors for the first time. Because I imagine we're going to get just as many people who would like the idea as just as many people who think it's the dumbest thing they've ever seen. Now, personally, myself, I was sold on it from day one because I'm a little tired of the cliche of, the gods being these great, wonderful beings of light, come down from a high on. And, that's just, I think, what everybody was expecting us to do. And to actually have them all Otzels like Daxter, some people may think of it as a cop-out, but I don't think anybody's going to see this one coming. I may be wrong. This part was also fun to animate, Veigar changing into an Otzel, scaling his various bones and whatnot to stretch him into the proper shape, and then poink. Now, this last part of the scene, because the scene was so long, and because I did have very little time to animate it, Jason Martinson, who's another one of our FMA animators, actually did some pinch hitting for me. So from here on in, it's pretty much all his animation. So thank you, Jason, from preventing me to have to stay one more night until 5 in the morning getting this done, so that you, the player, could enjoy our story.
You idiots. I told you we needed a plan B.
This is a fun one to work on. This is the first time we get to see the giant terraformer. It was the largest in scale creature we've ever done in the Jak and Daxter world. This is part of a 6-minute animation that I did for the actual boss fight when you're fighting this thing just after this movie. I painstakingly had him crawl over the entire world, this desert that we created, in this large loop. It took a very long time. Here's another giant terraformer scene. This one was really dramatic and it was a lot of fun to do. I was able to take some of the animation that I did from the in-game terraformer sequence and actually give it a different angle. You usually get to look down on it during the game, and this was cool to be able to look up at it and really see the scope of this thing. This terraformer was a rigging nightmare because during the animation we kept figuring out new things that we needed to do, have the terraformer come apart, have these wings detach from it, and I was animating pretty much right on Mike's heels as he was rigging this thing. So we had to go back and forth a lot. But the final product worked out really well. The particles and sound effects just really sell this scene, and I think it's really going to be exciting to see it. In all these scenes, I had to fake the camera a bit and fake the area of the desert so that you don't know exactly where he falls, because this could happen at any point during the gameplay. And then at this point, we switch out to the high-res level from the foreground object that I was animating and have Jak climb up the top of it. I faked it a bit and just showed him pop out at the end.
Got to give props here to Troy Adam for his kick-ass particle work with the wall of sand. This scene had an alternate version. We needed to show some sort of connection between Ashlyn and Jak at the end, and this one here was the original idea, which came up between a bunch of us, and there was another alternate that Neil, I kid you not, Druckmann came up with, where Ashlyn pulls down Jak's scarf. And it was a little more intimate, but this version works just as well.
And here we finally come to the outro of the game after a long struggle of many hours of gameplay. This scene is actually rather static. There's not a lot going on, it appears, at least in first glance, but really there's a lot going on in terms of technology. Actually, this scene, for the longest time, we were having a hard time with even trying to imagine doing with all the characters on screen. In fact, if you notice, some of these characters aren't exactly what they might appear to be. Kira, for instance, and Torn, if you actually watch them, if you notice, you'll pay attention, they're hardly moving at all because basically the models were simplified to only have one joint of animation to minimize the streaming data because we just couldn't have this many characters on screen at one time. And also, as you can see, the Otzels, the precursors, they actually have environment mapping on them, and it causes a lot of problems in the DMA memory to have this much stuff environment mapped on screen. So this scene, as simple as it looks in terms of actual action, is incredibly complex. So here we go, watching these people sort of wrap up their little story here. Jack's about to leave and do his thing. It was really kind of a funny point that actually, up until the very last minute, we thought Jack was going to get on the precursor ship and blast off into space for parts unknown until we kind of talked about it, and Evan Wells had a good point that he thought, well, you know what actually we should do is we should ellipse back to the beginning of the game and have Jack change his mind just like Daxter did in the opening scene when suddenly when the desk clears, Daxter's there waiting with Jack because they're inseparable, and of course Jack is as well. So it was a nice circular storytelling idea, and it ended up being perfect. Finally, Daxter gets his payoff here. He's been talking about pants for 2 games. He finally gets his pants, thank goodness. And this crazy precursor seems to want to turn everybody into a precursor, so he's a little trigger happy, isn't he?
Get used to it.
So here we see that Tess gets turned into a precursor Otzel as well, and so Daxter finally gets to get his little girlfriend, which is something we've been dancing around with for a while here, and what we're going to do with this problem. Here we see Jack and the precursors getting ready to leave. As you can see, Viger turned into a precursor's kind of gotten his comeuppance too, and now he and Cleaver are going to be together, which opens up a lot of possibilities for the future in stories. Can you imagine these two together trying to rule the world? The stupid guy and the smart guy? So now Jack's really kind of getting his last moment of truth where he's being asked to go off and become this great superhero. And so this is how we end our tale after 5 years of storytelling and gameplay. We kind of wrapped up this whole experience in the universe, and but you know, Jack and Daxter are inseparable. They're too good together. So
with all our adventures
this is keeping true to the franchise as well. And you have every scene we've got to end with Daxter just getting his punchline, getting his last moment and his last laugh. So after 3 great adventures, I think life is good.